I am actually going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott, who is like I said, our guest speaker for today, who will be talking about accessibility, which is an important topic, something that you should know about if you don't already know about or haven't started implementing, really important to do. So I'm going to just turn it over to Scott.
Sure. Well, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me in Sacramento. I have been to Sacramento a long time ago. I remember being there and went to the California State Railroad Museum. It was one of my favorite museums. So go nice. Sacramento for that. Yeah. I'm a big train buff, so it was a really cool place. The presentation tonight on accessibility is a topic that is near and dear a little bit to my heart. I kind of have a little bit of my own eye strains and struggle sometimes with overusing the internet, overusing my computers. I sort of relate to people who have issues. And that being said, I'm in no way am I consider myself an expert accessibility. I do try to keep above, I do try to stay on top of accessibility. And I wanted to share some of those tactics and tips that I have learned over the years with you guys. If you have a question, or you want to interrupt me, or you want to correct me or whatever, feel free to do so. This is a conversation. There's a handful of us, so feel free to jump in and share, or just listen in and take what you can, right? So that being said, let me go ahead and share my screen, right? That might help here. So let's start here. I use Google Slides, and unfortunately with sharing on Zoom, sometimes it's easier just to leave it like out of presenter mode. So bear with me. Don't look ahead to the next slide, but at the end of the day, this is my deck here. I also like to jump in between showing some demos and stuff like that. So I like to keep the tabs where I can reach them. So improving your web accessibility. As I mentioned, we already sort of did introductions, but I've been building with Divvy since it began. I've been working with WordPress since version 2.0, I believe. I've been using WordPress since about 2008. I started building with it when I started my own country music blog. I was a big country music fan. I live in Chicago, which, believe it or not, is one of the biggest country music cities in the entire globe. And because it's one of the biggest media markets, right? So I had a lot of fun building a community around country music in Chicago. I learned a lot about Divvy, learned a lot about WordPress, learned a lot about search engine optimization, user experience, community building. And during that time, I've also worked for our convention center in Chicago. It's called McCormick Place. If you've ever been to a trade show or an association meeting in Chicago, it probably was at McCormick Place. So today I've kind of married my background in public relations and journalism with web development, and I manage our websites and our digital marketing for the convention center, but I also provide freelance website services. And I know that accessibility is top of mind for many businesses because, one, we want the world to be a more inclusive space, and two, making sure our websites are available and at the ready for all types of visitors who come to our website, right? Also, it's becoming a legal issue. Companies are being sued for accessibility reasons. Some high-profile cases are starting to really address what is the sort of minimum accessibility compliance a company can be, and there's lots of issues and lots of questions around this particular topic. But one, I kind of want to just take a second to talk about what this means to us as freelancers, as agency owners, as developers, as enthusiasts, as bloggers. What does accessibility mean for you and your website? So as I mentioned, I work in the convention space, so we manage facilities, right? A facility. And we invite the public to our space. And in the real world, right, we call this ADA accessibility, making sure that our facility, our building is accessible to people who have disabilities or special needs. If they use a wheelchair or they're blind, that we have the proper facility needs to make sure we accommodate everyone into the building. And for many years, especially in the 90s, my boss once told me that, as a facility, it was our job to do everything everything reasonably accommodating for people with accessibility needs or special needs, right? So it's not a perfect science. There are plenty of places if you were to actually live. Fortunately, I don't have to use any type of mobility device, but if you live in the world where you do require a mobility assistance, you'll find that many, many things in our day-to-day lives we take granted for sort of also needs to translate to our website, right? If you're a convention visitor or someone looking to come to an event at our arena, they need to understand, like they need to be able to see if they're blind or they have other types of disabilities, that we want to make sure that our website is also accessible for them in that purpose, right? So on the web, we call this sort of like WCAG, or ally. These are the terms that we use to sort of talk about accessibility among our competitive sets. And I'll get more into sort of what this stuff means in this particular presentation and what your role as a web developer, webmaster, or blogger means to this particular, what this means to you for accessibility. Also, I just want to point out on my personal blog, scottwinterroth.com, I have a complete list of all the resources and links that I mentioned in this presentation. It's not, all you have to do is go to the homepage, and it's the most current post on my blog. So you can just go there and grab everything you need from this presentation from the links, and we can share a link to that in the meeting if that's okay with you. So basically, first things first, I lost my spot here. Humans interact using all of our senses, right? We interact with the web using our eyes, right? We interact using our hearing. When something starts playing, we listen to it. We operate with websites cognitively, right? We have to wrap our brains around what to do next, or we have to decide what's the next course of action for us, right? And most importantly, we interact physically with a website too, believe it or not. Just as much as going to a convention center is a physical activity, going through a website is a physical activity if you're using a mouse or you're typing into a contact form, right? There's a lot of different things that I think that we think most of us don't consider that actually are required in order to use a website, right? A lot of cognitive issues, auditory issues, visual issues, and physical issues. And there's actually a really great article on the Ally project that talks about, I borrowed some of my examples from this, is that accessibility is not just for blind people. A lot of times we think of accessibility as, oh, okay, well, if you're blind, you can't read my website. How do I optimize certain things on my website for blind people or for screen readers, right? It's way beyond that. There's lots of categories associated with accessibility that as a web developer, it's important for us to kind of really sort of understand what these different sort of disabilities are, and how can we better build websites and build content strategy plans that make sense. So I highly recommend reading this article by Dave Rupert. It kind of goes into what is accessibility definitely beyond just the standard, okay, either you're blind or you're deaf or you don't have hands, right? There's way more that goes into it. And that's one thing that I'm going to try to dispel in this particular presentation. I think one of my biggest points I want to try to make tonight is that designing for accessibility, especially in today's world, is a very gray area, because accessibility, unlike ADA guidelines for facilities, there's pretty finite rules and regulations for a physical building or a restaurant. The doors have to be a certain width. There has to be ramps. There has to be braille, right? There's certain specifications that when you're building, an architect designs a facility, they know they need this, this, and this to be at least a bare minimum compliance. Unfortunately, with web accessibility, we're still very much in the forefront of this. And although there are many groups that come out and try to give suggestions and guidelines like WCAG and Ally, there's not like a black and white, you have to do this for that, right? Or you have to do this for that. And that's what really makes it gray. And that's why I think it's really difficult for a individual or a group of individuals to sue a company for accessibility, when at the end of the day, there isn't really like, and this is my personal opinion, there isn't like a validation tool per se to say, yes, your website is 100% accessible, right? There's things that are out there, but we'll get into that in a second. So it's really about, for us as developers and designers or content strategists or wherever you sort of live within the web ecosystem, entrepreneurs, we need to just really live with more of an accessibility mindset. When we're building stuff, we need to think about, okay, if I had a cognitive or physical or visual disability, am I going to be able to interact with this website? This is something that I hope, if you take anything away tonight, it's more about living in someone else's shoes and understanding that if you're using a website, you're using an app, or you're using something that you built on the web, how would people use this if they don't have a keyboard, or they don't have a mouse, or they don't have eyes, right? So living with an accessibility mindset, and I'm going to give you some tools and resources for how to live that way. Now, one of the things that I want to sort of the elephant in the room here, if you will, is sort of like, what are the webmaster's job to accessibility? And there's a lot of information here. I'm going to cover a lot of information, and I'm going to go into a demo. So please bear with me here, guys. There's a lot of things that we need to consider as webmasters, as website owners, as the developer. And I'm going to start with kind of like what's easy, and then you'll see the red, work our way towards what are the harder things for us to do, the more, or maybe not harder, but the more costly things to do. And number one thing that anyone can do with a website that's pretty easy is to reduce the amount of pop-ups or flyovers or things that like are just annoying marketing garbage, right? You know, and I'm a digital marketer and I love pop-ups. Like they work great, but they are not good for accessibility, or if they get in the way, or they have persistence to them where they keep coming up, they keep coming back until you do something, or ads on a website that are distractive, or videos that play automatically. These are things that really we can just stop doing them. We don't need them per se. And that would improve your web accessibility without even having to do any type of extra programming. In fact, it's actually going to reduce your amount of programming if you don't install them in the first place, right? So think about pop-ups, think about flyouts. Like, I think when I mean flyouts, I mean like menu flyouts. So like this is a flyout, but sometimes they go deeper. It's like, you know, you can go 3 or 4 deep, right? Those are flyouts, right? So this is not hard for me with a mouse, but how do I navigate this without a mouse, right? It's hard. So we'll talk about that more in a second. So the number one thing to do, reduce flyouts, reduce pop-ups, reduce that type of stuff. The second thing that we all can do, especially with Divvy, is we can look at and sort of scrutinize our font sizes, the font contrast, and the typography, right? Number one thing to do, make sure that, for example, here, this heading font is a dark font on a lighter background. It's high contrast, right? If you had a visual disability, you'd be able to see that. Obviously, if you're colorblind, like the reds and blues, and I'm not an expert on being colorblind, but like those can sometimes be difficult. Those can be sometimes difficult colors for people to decipher if you have a color blindness, right? Being careful with the size of the font and the color of the font and the contrast of the fonts is definitely something that we as Divvy designers or Divvy developers can do, right? Especially with the tools that are given to us. Also, I had a gentleman who joined the meetup that we did in Chicago, and he said that he actually was partially blind, and he used a screen reader to help him read. He mentioned that having too big a font can be a problem too. That when fonts are too big or super large,
this guy's doing a presentation.
That basically that can be hard for him to get that in his screen reader when the fonts are super big. Like if he can't highlight the font to be like, read this for me, because it's so big, that's going to be really difficult for him to do, right? So he said try to avoid being really big, having really big fonts. And then also the typography. This is probably, kind of a given these days, but obviously when you use script type fonts, like for example, my name is in a script font or a handwritten font, like that's okay probably for a logo, but you wouldn't want to do your whole website in a script font if you don't have to, because it could be hard for anyone to read, even especially people who maybe have visual or cognitive disabilities, right? I actually have a wandering eye. So I know for me, I have to focus my eyes on stuff when I read stuff. So I don't, and if it's too hard for me to read, then I'm not going to want to read it, right? I'm going to glance over it, or I'm just going to move on to something else. It's really, as a marketer, it's sort of in your best interest to make sure that people read it, right? Because if you're building content, or you're building a visitor up to a call to action, like you want them to buy something, you want them to do something, then it's in your best interest to make sure that everyone who comes to your website will fully read the content. As a marketer, this is good stuff to know too, not just as a web developer. All right, next item. This is probably one of the easiest things to do that a lot of us may or may not do, but is optimizing your alt content on images. And this is one thing that I want to show everyone. So if we're building content in Divvy, let me go to a page here, right? And I don't always do this. So if you look at some of my websites and I don't have alt images, I'll be the first to say I don't do it all the time, just because I'm learning this just as much as you guys are. So please bear with me here. But like, for example, let's go to my about page. I have an image, and one of the easiest things I can do is create alt text, an alt text image that goes, or an alt tag with this particular image. Now, WordPress has built-in capabilities for doing alt tags, but Divvy also has its own sort of tool for adding an alt content. And alt descriptions we'll talk about in a second. So I'm in Divvy, right? I'm in the builder. I can click here to add my modules, that kind of thing. And this is an image module. And in this module, you'll see here there's the standard settings. By the way, the new preset settings that just came out today. It's pretty slick. I can talk about that later. But there is the content tab where I add the image and the link, the image would link to if needed. There's the design tab, and then there's the advanced tab. And in the advanced tab, there's actually there's another sub tab called attributes. And in here, it gives you two attributes. It gives you the option to add an image alternative text, and it gives you the option to add an image title text, okay? Now, an image alternative text is what shows up typically when you hover over an image with your mouse. If you ever hover over an image with your mouse and you see a little pop-up right now, it says 2016-03-24, that's pulling the image title, okay? Which is not ideal. If a person with a screen reader came to this page, that's what the screen reader would read to them, 2016-03-24. And the reader would be like, what does that mean? Or the user would be like, what does that mean? It means nothing to them. But what it should say is, Scott Winterroth takes selfie with group of attendees behind him, or something like that. It should be a descriptive piece of text that's about 120 characters that explains to, if you were talking to a friend who's blind, what would you try to explain to what this image is to them, right? You would say, this is I could write it differently. I'm just writing it quickly. It's group of people where Scott Winterroth takes a selfie of attendees behind him, right? And just really try to explain what this photo means. That should be the alternative text, and that's what you should use if you have images that have a particular purpose on your web page and that are not strictly decorative. Sometimes we do use images that are strictly decorative that do not provide any value to the page content. If they don't provide any page value, then you don't need to do an alt tag, right? If someone who's blind is looking at the page and there's a picture of a vase here, and the vase doesn't really do anything to add value to the page, or maybe is a background image, then, because you know how in Divvy you can add images to the background, then that you don't necessarily have to worry about alt tags for that particular page. The other thing I want to mention is there is the title tag, which the research that I've done, and I'm not an expert at this, but basically it's an attributes, right? So there is the alt text and the image title tag. There's also the opportunity to add an image title tag. An image title tag is sort of like in the back end of WordPress, you can see the title tags. It could be another description that you use to explain what the image is, but it might be more for like in the back end of WordPress. You can use both, but it's usually typically you add the alt text or the title text, one or the other. You typically don't have to do both. They should be descriptive in nature. They should be 120 characters or less. And they should also not be spammy, right? So there was, for a long time, alternative text was all the rage because it was a way to add search engine keywords to your site content. Therefore, search engine optimization nerds like myself were using those alt tags for like adding additional keywords to your site, right? So you don't want to do that. It should not be what that's for. It should be for descriptive content related to the image at hand. So this is definitely one thing this is like one of the easiest things for us as web developers, Divvy users, content creators that we can do with Divvy to help optimize your content for accessibility. And this costs virtually nothing to do. If you want to have someone write your alt tags, that's available as well. Actually, I provide that service. So if you're looking for someone to write descriptive alt tags on your images, I can help you out with that, but you can ping me later about that. So alt tags are definitely something you should consider. If you don't have them if you're not using it in Divi, maybe you're using it in the block editor, or in the Gutenberg editor, or the classic editor, you can also come into your website's media library, and right here, you can add using the standard WordPress media library, you can also add an alternative text image here. If you're using in the media library, sometimes people do that. They'll come into their media library and just start going through image by image and adding alt tags one at a time. If you're using the Gutenberg editor, I don't know if I have it on here or not. I think I do. I do. So if you're using the Gutenberg editor, the standard WordPress editor since 5.0, and you add an image module, it also has the option to add an alt text with the image that you use in the Gutenberg editor. So no matter where you go, there's almost always an option to add an alt text if that image requires it. Any questions about that? I'll pause for a second. Great. If you do, feel free to use the chat feature, and we'll get back. We'll address it in a second. All right. So alt tags, structured data. Structured data is also another tool that you can use to improve your SEO, your SEO, your search engine optimization, but also, in my opinion, your accessibility as well. If you use structured data properly, for example, let's say you have events on your website, and those events show up in your in search engine results. Structured data is a way that Google uses this data to show results in the search engine. So, for example, if you type in Winterroth Arena events, the events that are on our webpage are automatically pulled into Google. Okay, and this is helpful because this shows up right away for people who are looking for events at the arena. So this is what's called structured data. We actually provide this data to Google so it can parse this data and to show up in the search engines. Now, this is probably more of a search engine optimization tactic, but if you think about it, if it's easier for people to find the content they're looking for in Google, it's going to help with accessibility. So definitely something to consider as well when you use proper structured data, as well as alt tags and meta tags, like meta titles and meta descriptions on your web pages, because that helps people find the content they're looking for. And if they have cognitive, if they have visual disabilities, obviously finding the right content they want at the right time is going to make it easier for them. Overall, it's going to just generally improve their overall user experience for everyone involved in the website, including accessibility. All right, site structure, taxonomy, and H tags. So this is another tactic to kind of cover. One, accessibility really sort of starts with your content strategy on your website, or your user experience strategy. If your site is like an encyclopedia of your business, which this happens, this is kind of how we built websites for a long time. But if you have a lot of content on your website, and it's like, if it's confusing for you, it's going to be confusing for other people. So in my opinion, improving your website's accessibility starts with the overall content strategy of your site. If you have more content on there than you need, don't use it. If you want to have the right amount of content for the right amount of visitors, and really think about what your visitors need and why, and what type of content they want. So accessibility starts with the content strategy. Content strategy can also sort of be a tool to think about, how does my menu lay out, right? Is the right taxonomies for my content? Is my content organized properly for people to find it? Right. So if the menu's got it's got 1,000 different links in there because that's how you just built your website, you didn't really do a content strategy, then that's going to make it harder for people who have to navigate your website with physical disabilities. It's also going to make your website harder for people to navigate with any type of disability, with no disabilities. But also, it's going to affect people who are even in higher risk categories. So start with a solid content strategy. Learn more about how a good content strategy can help your website and also essentially help your accessibility. Also, when you're creating content, you want to make sure that you use heading tags, right? H tags. So in this particular post, there's not a lot of words on this post. It's mostly links and resources. But on this post, I use headings to break up blocks of content, right? And headings are in the HTML space. So those are represented by H1s, H2s, and H3s, right? So and so on and so forth. And each page is always starts with a H1 tag. The H1 tag is the title tag or the main title of the page. And screen readers will use H tags to help decipher content. Also, they might use screen readers H tags to help jump around the page. So the title tag is always the main H tag. You may be familiar if you use any type of editor. In WordPress, they typically give you the option to select the different headings, right? So in this particular post, there's the title tag, H1 here, and then everything underneath it is classified as an H2 tag. These are the sub paragraph tabs or the subtopic tags, and they're all H2s, and that's for a reason. You'll note that I don't go from H2 to H3 and back to H2. What you want to do is you want to keep a smooth, consistent H tags on your page. Typically, you want to think of them as an inverted pyramid. So you always start with H1, then the next tag down should be H2, and you just keep using H2s unless you need an H3. If you have a subtopic of a subtopic, then you might need to use what would be an H3 tag. But once you go to H3, you don't typically go back to H2. At least that's what I've been told. So you can't. Sometimes we use heading tags, at least in the past, we've used heading tags as a way to design content because it makes the text bigger or smaller. We don't really want to use heading tags for visual designs. We want to use them to structure content. Additionally, H tags are popular within the search engine optimization space because they indicate to search engines that whatever this text is higher priority, right? According to we're basically telling Google that this content is a heading, right? This is going to explain what this rest of this content is about. So using H tags or using heading tags are definitely a part of an SEO strategy as well. So just keep that in mind. I might try to find a better example. So let's see here. Let's let this load up. Either way, this post doesn't really have it either. But basically, it's a way to break apart. It's headings are great. It's a way to break apart long swaths of copy to make it visually pleasing. But also, it's a way to show the search engines and to show screen readers what's the most important content. This is all done in Divvy. This is my Content Academy blog. And this is all done in Divvy. So again, H1 tag, right? H2 tag. And then this would be an H2, and then there might be an H3 tag. These would be H3 tags probably because they're smaller in size. But again, using H tags, using Divvy, using ways to sort of shape your content so it makes it easier for users to decipher and to navigate your content with that. All right. Search friendly. Basically, one of the things I want to mention, I sort of mentioned this, if your website has a good, solid search engine optimization and a solid content strategy, if it's easier for search engines to crawl your website, it's going to be easier for users to interact with your website. So investing in a solid search engine strategy is also good for SEO and for accessibility. So definitely keep that in mind. I sort of already covered that when we talked about structured data, but just keep in mind, what's good for search is probably good for accessibility and vice versa. All right, subtitles, transcripts for video and audio content. So if you have video content on your website, you want to make sure that you provide what's the word I'm looking for? Subtitles, right? So this is this is actually being pulled from YouTube, but with this, I also have subtitles available for people who watch this video. Okay. So if you had Audible, if you couldn't hear, the subtitles would show up with this particular video. And I see they're not showing for some reason. Here we go. So now obviously subtitles are turned on. If you provide videos natively through your website, you want to make sure that you use subtitles that will work for them. YouTube, Facebook, they typically allow for they use auto-generated subtitles, but there are lots of great services out there like rev.com that will transcribe and create subtitles of your content for just a couple dollars per minute. It's really affordable. So this isn't something that's necessarily free for you to do, but it's easy to do, and it's something if you provide captions or a transcript with audio content, that can make it easier for people who have different types of audible, cognitive, or visual disabilities who use your website. So definitely consider adding transcripts to video or audio content. If you have a podcast, make sure you have a transcript if possible for people who can't listen. And also there are other advantages to using transcripts and using subtitles, mainly because a lot of us use our iPhone or use our handheld devices without audio on. So if there's transcripts, they can start reading your video without actually hearing it, which is another advantage too, user experience advantage, but it helps for SEO or for accessibility. I'm sorry, for accessibility. I keep saying SEO, accessibility, and that is definitely something you want to implement on your site. All right, finally, the hardest one that I think is tricky for people who utilize WordPress and Divi is what is called the ARIA attributes. And this is an acronym for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, or ARIA tags. So I'm no expert at this, but what I do know is that when done properly, ARIA tags help people navigate a web page without a mouse and without a keyboard, right? So if you don't have ARIA tags set up with Divi, it will be difficult to do this. Right now, I'm actually going to use the tab key on my keyboard. And with the tab key on my keyboard, I can start to navigate the web page by each link, right? This page isn't great. Let me go back to the other page. So after the page loads and I start hitting the tab key, it's going to walk me through the web page, right? It's going to go to each individual link that I have available. And people who don't have a full keyboard or a full set of digits to use your web page, they might need to use something like this tab key to do this. And the ARIA tags help them navigate the page. Now, by default, Divi does not include ARIA tags support in Divi. And this is something that's important to accessibility. This is something that is important to a more inclusive web. So us, as members of Divi, members of Elegant Themes, we need to pressure them more for this because we need this type of accessibility features built into the Divi theme. But that being said, there are resources. Now, this is a little harder thing to do, especially if you want to do it properly. Setting ARIA tags in your websites takes a lot more than I can provide in a presentation today. But if you want to sort of provide a bare minimum, kind of at least get you in the game type of experience, then I found out it's now on GitHub, but there actually is a Divi accessibility plugin available on the web. It's free. It's by Campus Press. It used to be available in the WordPress plugin repository, but for some reason, it's no longer available on the plugin repository. And I asked them why, and they didn't really give me a solid answer. But I think it's because the plugin repository has banned plugins that use the word accessible in their titles. So it's not on the WordPress plugin repository anymore, but it is active, it is in development, and on GitHub, you can download the plugin here. So if you sign in to GitHub, and you can literally download the code in a zip file right here, download a zip. And then once it's on your desktop, you can upload it into your WordPress plugins like you would upload any other third-party plugin into your website. And on here, you can follow along with what's going on. So actually, I think they put into, let's see here, closed. I wrote right here, why is this plugin pulled from the directory? It's just hi, there's a problem reported WordPress.org, name of the plugin, so no worries. So just so you know, it's still being actively developed. It's just that there's issues, right? So because WordPress doesn't want people selling accessibility as a solution, mainly because there's a lot of legal reasons for that. But anyways, that's at least my guess. So that's at least my foresight into it. But this plugin still exists. It's still in active development. Thank you to the Campus Press team for providing this for us, because that's what creates that ARIA tag solution. So once it's installed as a plugin, that's what made it easier for me to navigate through the menus. Let's see here. If I go to Divi accessibility and I deactivate it, and then I refresh the page, I'm hitting the tab key and it's not doing anything. So you need that plugin at least as a bare minimum to do that, where people can navigate with it doesn't do what it was doing. So that plugin, even though it doesn't seem like it has a lot of features, it really does help with accessibility, at least from my standpoint. I don't have someone who uses it and says, yeah, this is great. Someone who needs accessibility hasn't told me that, but from my understanding, it does help. I'm going to turn it back on just because I don't want to forget about it. All right, so that's one of the secret weapons I definitely want you guys to consider when thinking about accessibility for your website, is this Divvy accessibility plugin. I already showed you sort of how to do in the advanced tab, the alt images. We already covered that. So that's another thing. And then finally, by doing all of this and by testing your website with various testing tools that are available on the web, you'll start to build this accessibility mindset. Because when you start to get feedback from plugins that are from testing tools that say your website should do this, your website should do that, you start to know this stuff. So when you build websites, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to test it. You know, okay, I can't do this because it's not going to pass this test. So let's talk about some of those testing plugins and how they help. The number one it's called Lighthouse. At least this is the one that I use a lot. It's called Lighthouse. It's by Google. It's an open source thing, open source tool by Google. Let's go back to the preview page here. So it's actually built into the Chrome developer tools automatically, but there's also a Google Chrome plugin for it, or Google Chrome add-on. If you use Google Chrome, you can install it through the add-on store. And I actually like the add-on better because it reminds me to check it. So there's a visual reminder. So when you click it, you hit generate report, and it does a little, it's doing this thing. So let's let it do its thing here for a second. Let's see here. Oh, I got an error message. Lighthouse was unable to reliably load your requested page. Okay. That's not good, but we will see. Maybe it's temporary. All right. Lighthouse, generate report. And it gives you, that's weird. I had never had that problem before. It gives you feedback on a couple different areas of your website, or a couple different aspects. As accessibility is one, it's Google, so search engine optimization is another, and so on and so forth. It usually pops up. Maybe it's down right now. That's kind of weird, but it pops up and it gives you a score, and it also gives you feedback on what it should be there. So definitely check this out. Maybe I'll go right into let's see. Otherwise, you go to View, Developer, Developer Tools, and then you go to Lighthouse, and let's try it here if this helps any better. It's almost done. Okay, so basically you'll see here it provides like a score, right? It's saying that we can improve our performance. It's not uncommon for WordPress websites to score low on performance because of the way that WordPress works, but definitely check that out. Accessibility, we get an 89% or 89 out of it. I don't know if it's percent, 89%, I assume. Best practices and SEO. So if you go in here, then we click on accessibility, it's going to give us some reasons why some things we can fix, right? It says we have a few buttons that don't have names, right? So that means we need to better name them using an alt attribute or something of that nature, right? That there are contrast colors that we need to fix. It's some things that these items in these divs right here, it's saying MEC events. So that's here. It's saying this text here needs more contrast. So I need to make this a darker gray or a black, right? To make it to have more contrast. And you can just go through your website and start to tick away at some of these feedback items that they want you to do in here to make it accessible. So as I mentioned, the good news is once you do this a few times and you start to learn what doesn't pass and what passes, you build that mindset. So when you go ahead and build your next website, you know, okay, I can't use light gray because light gray is not going to pass this test. So it helps you build that accessibility mindset. It helps make you a better developer, a better designer, better content creator as you create content for the web. And sometimes there's going to be stuff in here that you just don't know what it is. You're going to have to just Google it and try to figure it out. Or sometimes you just have to take calculated risks and be like, you know what, given Divvy is an awesome tool, but it's just not going to get me there. So I might just have to forget about it, either use a different theme, a different service, different solution, or just have to just reasonably accommodate the best you can on your website for accessibility. All right. Now, wrapping things up here, some of the tools, definitely, there's also the Wave inspection tool. The Wave is another on-page SEO or accessibility optimization test that is available in a Google Chrome extension. It's WAVE, and if you click on it, it takes you through a lot of different. It's powered by WebAIM, which is another accessibility project, and it takes you through and a lot like what are your errors. It tells you what's missing alternative text, right? So it's not uncommon on this website because I'm not the only person who manages this website, right? So other people add stuff to it and I don't always know what gets put on here, right? So sometimes I have to go through here and just audit what's going on because we want to make sure that everything is done properly. Other times too, like this is pulling from a plugin, and there's no way I can edit this without completely rewriting the plugin, right? So it's my job to tell the plugin author that, hey, you need to fix this so it's accessible and do the best they can. So you can go through here or read through all the stuff and help you optimize your website for accessibility. So definitely check out the Wave tool. A couple other things, Search Console. If you don't already, obviously Google Search Console is a tool that you use to optimize your website for search engine optimization. It's free. All you have to do is verify your website with Google Search Console, and it will give you some detailed information about your website in terms of how it interacts with the search engines. Let's see. Let me get a website here. And basically, this isn't necessarily SEO, or this isn't. I keep saying SEO, accessibility. This isn't necessarily accessibility related feedback. But as I mentioned before, if your website's performing well in search and it's highly searchable, it's going to make it easier for people to use overall. So use this feedback from Search Console towards your accessibility optimization as well. And then finally, Speechify. This is a fun little tool that I use. I don't have it active, so let me turn it on real quick. It's Speechify for Google Chrome. And what it does is it reads web content. So I can highlight some content right here. Let's say I want it to read this. And then let's see here. I have to find it in a million tools I've got going on here. Right here, Speechify. And it will read the web content to me.
I am an American English voice.
Oh, that's not what I wanted her to read though. Let's see here. Is it reading it? Let's see here. They change it.
Hi, my name is Joanna.
I don't know. Anyways, it's not working right now, so bear with me here. But anyways, when it does work, it will read your text to you back, right? And if you're writing web content, especially like alt tags, sometimes it helps you to hear someone else say it to you, right? Especially in a screen reader type voice. So I use this sometimes when I'm writing alt tags. I'll have it read it back to me and just be like, yeah, that's what that image is all about. That works. You know, so it's just helpful to hear someone else say what you're writing to make it work for other screen readers and that kind of thing. And I don't know why it's not working. That's really weird. But anyways, that's how it goes. So Speechify, then that's all some of the tools that I use to help improve your website for accessibility. A lot of the resources I mentioned, they're also on my website, the w3.org. This is the WCAG guidelines. This is definitely something you should orient yourself with. There's a lot of like recommendations. There's no clear cut things to do, but there's recommendations. And of course, this is it's very dry. It's not something you want to read for fun kind of thing. But at the end of the day, this is definitely the book and where to go for accessibility information. The Ally project, I think, is a little more user friendly and a site that I actually like to look at myself. One thing I also like to do too is actually look and see how their site works. Like, how do I navigate their site with, alt text, alt keywords? Because obviously you would assume these guys are doing what they can to make their site accessible, right? So see what they're doing in terms of accessibility. I already showed you this, how people with disabilities use the web. That was one of my first recommendations. There actually was a really great article on the Elegant Themes blog about a year ago, June 29th of 19, that John Hughes wrote. And this talks about ARIA tags and your WordPress site. So a little bit more Divi specific content for area tags, right? Because between alt tags and area tags, those are two things that if you're going to do a lot more accessibility optimization, you're probably going to be looking at this stuff the most kind of thing. Everything else you're probably already doing at some level in some ways. And then those resources are on the site. And that's all I got. So any questions, comments, or stories, feel free to chime in. Any feedback, I'd love to hear it. If you have any ideas for if you want to showcase what you're doing, any questions, go for it. So Rosalinda, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you, Scott. That was an awesome presentation. I'm sure everyone, whether they knew any of it or not, picked up something certainly useful. I know I did. And your chart is very helpful, working from easy to hard. I know that we try to be very cognizant of at least doing those first 4. And when it gets to those last few, it can be kind of be tricky. Yeah. So your tricks on that is very helpful, and your resources as well. Does anybody have any questions for Scott? We can open it up. I know, looks like Diana actually had a bit of a question in the chat, something about structured data. Maybe explaining what structured data is a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Structured data.
I'm a newbie.
Sure, yeah. So structured data is, it's kind of hard to explain in some ways, but so you create content on your website, right? So for example, we have an event calendar it shows up, and we add an event on our site, and then it creates this back end sort of code that Google uses. It's sort of like a sitemap for Google. If you ever use an XML sitemap for your site, it's sort of similar. It's like special content that only Google reads, and then Google can use that data to parse it. There's a whole list of data here's a structured data testing tool. So this is a great place to start. So basically, I got the Zoom chat in the way, but they give you a whole list of what can be what's available, like book reviews, product reviews, like those are all available to be in structured data. Search results, like I can't. Usually it says there's understanding how structured. Yeah,
Can
like
I
this
just
is.
ask, if I'm starting off new with
Mhm.
Divi, how do I, as a non-developer creating my own website, think about structured data or data?
The first thing you want to consider is what type of content do you have that is ideal for structured data. So you might not have anything that is ideal for structured data. There's somewhere there's a list of everything that you can use in structured data, but I'm trying to find it here real quick. But like, for example, like if you don't have recipes on your website, then that's not something you can do, right? But if you have like events, or you have book reviews, or you have like a shopping cart, like a store, that all is structured data friendly stuff. So that would be where you want to learn more about that. And I definitely will add a link to that if I find it, I'll add it to my blog post page.
Fabulous. Yeah, I will be running events. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cool thing about events is that we use an event calendar plugin, and that event calendar plugin for WordPress does all that for us. So all we have to do is it just does it all on our own. We don't actually have to do anything with it. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Is that the same as schema? Do you know, Scott?
You know, I'm hesitant to answer this. I want to say yes, but I think that they're like cousins. I think there's a little bit of difference between the two, but structured data, I think we used to call it schema, but then Google started calling it structured data, so now we call it structured data. So if that answers any questions, so yeah, and I know that I've seen it before. There's a list where it gives you all types of like and there's some things that like are like not. They have also been called rich results, right? Mm-hmm. They're called rich results. They're called structured data. Here we go, structured data gallery. I bet this is it. Yeah, I don't know. It used to have a list of, here they are, right here. Articles, books, breadcrumbs, carousels, courses, critic reviews, data sets, whatever that means, employer aggregate rating, events, fact checks, FAQs, how-tos, image licensing. So obviously sometimes you almost job postings, that's a big one. I do that one a lot. I have people who have that need a lot, like they're recruiters or something like that, and they want their jobs to be in the search index listing. Like there's a whole bunch of them. Your Google My Business is technically a structured data, right? If you have a Google My Business listing, a Google Maps listing, movies, all kind. Oh, podcasts. I didn't know that. I should look into that one myself. So yeah, there's a whole list of them here, and the more that you create content, this kind of goes back into your content strategy though too. Like typically, like you might be building a website around structured data. Like if you have a reviews website, like a recipe website, you're building an entire website around structured data. So it's going to be kind of part of your overall content strategy as well. And then you're using a plugin or using other resources to help you build that structured data to make sure that Google has everything it can to parse it properly. Frequently asked questions is a popular one too, or Q&A like this. So
you'll share this?
I'm sorry?
You'll share this link with us?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Fabulous, thank you.
Bakar, you had your hand up. I see your hand up there.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say I used that Yoast plugin has a feature in there that you can create structured data. So I've created some how-tos on my website, for my Mac automation website. And sometimes Google will pick it up if it gets popular enough. It'll pick it up and put it in the search. So like, how do you do something kind of thing. And then also definitely for recipes. And I think the Gutenberg has some modules for creating structured data within an article. So it is good. I think it's good for SEO to create it if your website, is something for that. Any kind of how-to website or question and answer, it's good to stick that in there because it's good for not only for just reading purposes for people reading, but also, Google might pick it up and put it in there.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, you could go from being like a number 3 result to number 1 if you have the right type of structured data kind of thing, or more. But it's hard. The only ones I've really had I can only really talk about is the event structured data. That's the only one I've really been able to rank properly. That's just because that's the space that I'm in, is events kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, no, definitely something to consider for SEO, and I think at the end of the day for accessibility too. I mean, it helps everyone. So
there was a question in the chat from Hardik, and Hardik, I don't know if you want to type in the chat or verbally ask. Just clarification, do you mean the steps for accessibility for e-commerce? Okay, so accessibility with regards to e-commerce sites.
Again, content strategy, like, are you making it easy for people to understand how your products and services fit into your e-commerce shop? Are you using alt attributes? Are you using ways for people to navigate? Is your checkout process make sense? Like, does the flow make sense? Like, if you got a million different steps that people have to take with WooCommerce, because WooCommerce has a million different steps in order to get to the checkout, the final receipt page, like, can you streamline that at all to make it easier for people to go through that process? That's not just an accessibility, that's also like a marketing makes business sense strategy, in my opinion. You know, one thing I hate with WooCommerce, I love WooCommerce, but one thing I hate about it is that you have to hit, if you don't turn it off, if you hit add to cart, a flag pops up and then it says view cart. Whereas there's one setting inside of WooCommerce that we just talked about the other day, and the WooCommerce one that we did. But if you go in there, make it, this is the demo site we did for our WooCommerce presentation. So bear with me here, guys. So if you go to a product here and you hit add to cart, it right now, because it's turned on, it automatically goes right to the cart, which may or may not be ideal for your website. But by default, if you go to products, if you go to WooCommerce settings, let's see here. It's one of these like core settings. I think it's like under products. It says enable redirect the cart after successful addition, right? So by default, this is turned off. So now if you go to a product, and you click add to cart, this comes up, right? This bar comes up, and then you have to go to view cart. So it depends on how many products you have. Like, if you only have really selling 1 or 2 products, you don't need that extra step. I would just direct them right to the cart. So just stuff to consider, because like that could be the make or break between a sale or not having a sale. And, you know, from accessibility standpoint, like if someone doesn't have a mouse, it's like they got to figure out how to get up to that. If somebody doesn't have a mouse and they get this thing, now they got to how do they get back up to this, you know, this view cart thing, you know? So it's just another step that maybe isn't necessary. So that's some high level tips that I can think of off the top of my head.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions or even comments, any experiences that you might have had, or anything to add to what Scott has presented? None? Going once?
It's totally okay. I know. My goal is that this is kind of high level, because I know that we all get busy day to day doing web stuff, and it's really easy. What's awesome about Divvy is that it enables us to build anything we want, but we sometimes don't consider what the impact of being able to do whatever you want is. Right. You know, so we as the designers, developers, content creators, we need to also remember that we have to go back and optimize for accessibility as best possible. So I hope this kind of helps build a mindset, and if anything, guide you to some of the resources and tools that are available today on the web that you can simply start auditing your site and learning about what you can and can't do. And the beauty of this is that, one, we have a community Rosalinda, thank you for having a community that we can ask questions and share. If you guys start having optimization problems or need some help with accessibility, hey, let's do it. Let's do a follow-up. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on and what problems you have with accessibility. Also, and I said this the other day at the organizer meetup that we had for Divvy, that this is an opportunity for us as power users to go back to elegant themes and say, hey, we're banding together, and if you guys don't put this into your theme, I don't know what will happen, but something will happen.
Right.
So this is our opportunity to kind of like band together and organize and tell elegant themes what we want, because they're busy trying to make money and we're busy trying to use their tool to make money. So we got to figure that out, So yeah, I thank you for letting me come into your evening, and I hope this is useful, and I look forward to hearing some feedback about how you guys are optimizing your websites from now on. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Scott. I know you're a busy guy. Thanks for taking your time out to do this presentation. Really appreciate it. You as our first official presenter for a really broad but really important topic as well. Oh, looks like there are a couple of questions which we can, I don't know if you have time, Scott, to hang out for a few more minutes.
The problem is, I'm like 2 hours ahead of you guys.
Right,
so,
I totally understand.
I got a little bit more time, and I'm not like I have to go to bed per se, but.
Do you have a contact way for people to contact you in case they do have a question?
Sure. My website, scottwinterroth.com. Mm-hmm. My email is not Scott at scottwinterroth.com, although maybe it should be. But I'm just going to type it. I don't know if you can see it, but Scott at frontandsocial.com. That's my contact information. And I also would be happy to share the deck. So if you want to share the deck around with people with the video, we'll get it all together and we'll send it to you guys. Great. And then the links, as I already mentioned, but I like to hear myself talk, so bear with me. The links are available on my blog for free. Just go to the site. It's the first post. And here's all the important resources and tools that I mentioned in the presentation. And if you have any feedback, positive or well, actually, if you have negative feedback, I don't care. No, I'm kidding. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. That would mean the world to me, and I would appreciate it. So
great. Yeah. Thank you. And also a reminder that record this meetup, so it will be posted. Scott will have it on his YouTube, so we can share that link as well. I will share it in the meetup, and then also on our brand new Twitter account. For those who might have missed it, we do have a Twitter account now for Sacramento Divvy. It is, why do I keep forgetting it? Probably because I just created it today. Divi Sac Meetup. So if you are on Twitter, would like to join Twitter, we are on Twitter now. So again, thanks everybody for attending tonight. Thank you again, Scott. Our next meetup is next month, August 13th. It's the second Thursday of the month. Our meetups are always the second Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. Pacific time, California time. So until then, may you all be safe and be well, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.